Good. Well, it's good morning for you. It's good afternoon for us in the UK. And you were telling me, so you've just finished working out. Oh no, you were interrupted by your workout by my email.
I'll admit it. Yeah, so I was getting my early Saturday morning workout in, but you know what? The next best thing to getting your own personal workout is being able to share the benefits of a healthy lifestyle and a workout with other people. So this is a real treat.
Well, perfect. So that's a good way to start. If you don't mind telling us about yourself, who are you?
So I am Paul Arciero. I am a faculty member. I'm a full professor in the Department of Sports Medicine and Nutrition in the Neuromuscular Research Laboratory, Warrior Human Performance Center, in the School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences at the University of Pittsburgh, where I just assumed this position as recently as September. So before that, for 30 years, I was at a smaller, what we call here in the States, a liberal arts institution in upstate New York, Skidmore College. But it's a very unique college because they place an equal emphasis on academic scholarly pursuits and our teaching. And so I was able to engage in some really sophisticated human lifestyle interventions at Skidmore for the past 30 years. I was a full professor at Skidmore. So huge career change in the sense of geography, but then also here at Pittsburgh, I'm a full professor, primarily, actually only doing research.
That's so fascinating. I'm always interested to find out how academia works in different parts of the world, because in the UK we also have different universities, so Russell Group universities post 1992, and where before, it's maybe still similar now. Some universities might be only research focused, so you do 70% have 70% research commitments, and then 20% teaching and 10% admin. Doesn't always work that way. And then
Okay.
some of the other institutes are more teaching focused with the maybe more like 70% teaching, 20% research and 10% admin. So it's very interesting to see. And for you moving into that new space where you're full research, how do you feel about that?
Oh, I have mixed feelings. I was just actually talking to one of our graduate students yesterday. He was thinking of maybe making a career change out of the full research model. And how do I feel about it? I think the balance is really important. I think having that ability to convey and disseminate our research findings to a more public domain layperson audience is paramount to ultimately the message that we want to have with our research. Now, some research doesn't lend itself, right? Some research is really content being written up in a scientific journal or in a scholarly journal and letting it just sit there for people to read on their own and enjoy. But the research that I do, and this is important for the world. And so I feel as though I personally have an obligation to not just conduct the research, but to share it and sharing it with students and young intellectual minds. I think is really important, and so I value the teaching. I actually miss it. I haven't been away from it that long, but I definitely miss it. But we'll see where this takes us. One of the great things about the work that I do, it lends itself to platforms for me to share my research around the world. And so that's exciting that I do have that opportunity, independent of being in the traditional classroom, to share the message of the research.
That's amazing. One of the things I love about having this platform is I find I get to, well, in the end, I always speak to like-minded people, and everything you said I was totally resonating with. So, on to today's interview. Now, I'll just give you a bit of backstory. The reason, well, I sort of said this off air, but one of the things is I'm resuming Monday Science, getting back into podcasting, getting back into regular episodes. And when I was thinking about January, the start of year, I reflected on how I usually am. at the start of the year, which is I set all my goals and I'm like, I am going to lose weight. I am going to be healthy. I am going to be consistent with my fitness. And to be fair, for 2023, I've been a lot better with my, this is not a confession. Well, it is a little bit, but I have been better with my fitness and diet. And something that I have been doing more of is intermittent fasting. And so I just started reading up. This has been because I did intermittent fasting before, and I read some studies where they talked about the different durations for men versus women. And then I've also tried keto. Again, I'm trying to say this is not a confession of my journey of diet, but I
It's
ended up
important.
reading. Thank you. I ended up reading more about intermittent fasting in the last few months, and then I came across your profile, and I came across some of your articles around intermittent fasting, and then this term protein pacing, which I hadn't heard of before. And one thing I like to do is if I read something and I read somebody's papers, it's always nice when people read your papers anyway. But I'm like, oh, I'm lucky that I have a platform that I can ask them to come and talk to me and share their knowledge, and we can disseminate that out to the wider community. And so really my interest is it's trying to understand, okay, the start of the year, a lot of people are thinking about health and fitness. I feel like it's the one time of the year where we're all collectively thinking about how can we improve ourselves and what can we do, which is something we should be maybe thinking about throughout. And I know this is an area of expertise. Sorry, the fitness, well-being, health. In fact, you've, as you said, you've just been finishing a workout, and I came across a lot of your articles that were very interesting around, as I said, intermittent fasting, protein pacing, particularly with the intermittent fasting, the duration and what works. And then the paper that I'm just looking at now, which was about morning exercise as it relates to benefits for men and women, which is a big, like I read that. I was working on my fitness routine for next week, and I've already made some changes based on one of your papers. Yeah.
That was a big BBC Reels paper, actually, too.
Yes, yeah, it's just so interesting. So this is really what I want to talk about. What is protein pacing?
Oh, that's a great starting point. If you don't mind, this
Please.
selfless plug.
No, I mean,
But
I don't want to be, because another thing I was going to ask you actually, because you've got that book and you've also got the protein pacing book as well. Is that there's two separate, the
yeah,
price
this
tag?
one, I would say, to be honest with you, Dr. Bahija, they're both research attempts at just a mind dump of my research, for the world to read. So it was my first kind of foray out into that realm. I do a lot of speaking to the general public, but to put it into writing so that they could use it as a resource, this one before the protein pacing, I think would be the better one for people to have, just because it provides a more of a well-rounded lifestyle. Um, well, thank you for highlighting those things. Yeah, my research, I so much enjoy it, and like I said, there's nothing that I'd rather be doing than a workout, or maybe spending time with my family. Is sharing all of this information with you and the world. Um, and so, what it was initially, this happened in the beginning of my career. Actually, I was at Washington University School of Medicine, working with really the pioneer of applied physiology, Dr. John Hollizy. He was an MD, but he kind of broke the mold of a traditional medical doctor in that instead of focusing his intellectual um, prowess, on the treatment, he was more interested in the prevention. And he really spearheaded this whole field of applied physiology and lifestyle. And so I had the good honor of conducting my postdoctoral fellowship with Dr. Hollizy at Washington University. And the study that we were interested in was taking a group of diabetics, so people that had just been diagnosed or had um, pre, uh, type 2 diabetes, and place them on a lifestyle intervention. And they were on one of two interventions. One was, and it was a very short study, so it all has to be in context, but it was a 10-day study. And they either exercised with me for an hour a day, maintaining their normal food intake, we had them do 10 days of a reduced calorie diet. And I remember when we were planning out the design of this study, because we said we have 10 days, what can we do from a nutritional standpoint that would manifest into a potential benefit in terms of their diabetes? And they were individuals with obesity as well, with the diabetes, so it was a comorbid condition. And what I fell on was some of the research that was showing that increasing your protein intake seemed to be somewhat beneficial. Again, this was back in the 1980s, so it was a long time ago, before this other emphasis of nutrition that we've had. So anyway, to make a long story short, I just decided to increase the protein up to about 30 to 35%. And at that time, it was really unusual for people to consider increasing dietary protein to that level. That was twice what we use here in the States, twice the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance. So it was a little bit of a risk. And then we also cut their calorie intake by quite a bit, down to about 40 to 50% of what they were normally consuming. So it was quite a significant change. What we found, though, was so revealing was that both groups had magnificent, just surprisingly, alarmingly improved diabetes response improvement. Their insulin levels plummeted, their glucose levels plummeted. So you kind of expect that. But then what we also did was we did a fancy laboratory technique called a hyperglycemic clamp, where we superimposed a very high level of glucose in their system. And we did it at the beginning of the 10 days and then again at the end of the 10 days. So we had this comparison. And while we had this glucose circulating in their blood, not to a dangerous level, but to a level that would be similar to what someone would have if they ate a fairly rich, carbohydrate-rich diet. And then we superimposed upon that a bolus of fat and amino acids, so fat and protein. To make a long story short, the findings were, again, just startling, that both groups in as little as 10 days, in some cases, nearly almost had a reversal, some of the people in their type 2 diabetes. Others had just this incredible favorable response. So both were super powerful in helping these individuals that were literally suffering from a lifestyle-related disease improve to a significant point. And that was, again, what we call a mind-blowing experience for me, because it was so real. I was exercising with them. I was monitoring their food. I was giving them their brown bag lunches, literally every day for the 10 days. So I was seeing this. They were living in the General Clinical Research Center. It's called the GCRC here in the States. So we had really tight control over their lifestyle. And to witness that degree, that magnitude of health improvement in people that were sick in as little as 10 days changed the course of not just my research, but my view on life and the impact that the choices that we make every day can have on our well-being. So that was the starting point of protein pacing. And from there, I began to refine it and develop it. And it took me, 20 years plus years. I've been at this now for 38 years, but it took about 20 to 25 years for me to fine tune it and really dial in on this dietary eating pattern, protein pacing. And what it is simply is 3 to 4, preferably 4, very high quality, and we can talk about what that means, high quality protein meals or snacks. They don't have to be full out, all out meals, but 4 protein meal snacks, evenly spaced throughout the day, every 4 hours, with the first one beginning within ideally 30 to 60 minutes before waking up in the morning, and then the last one within 2 hours of going to sleep at night. And those bookend, I call them the bookend protein pacing feedings, are the most important. The other 2 that you obtain during the day are also very critical, preferably with that 4-hour window of space. But the ones at the beginning and the end of the day are most important. And they have to be of a certain amount of protein. That's the other thing. So quality is number one, and then quantity of the protein is number two. And that is really based on your body weight. I have a free download app on the iOS Apple Store for people that want to know exactly what theirs should be based on their biometrics that they put in. So those are the primary tenets of protein pacing. 4 feedings of generally 25 to 40 grams of protein 4 times a day, evenly spaced every 4 hours. First one within 30 to 60 minutes of waking in the morning, and the last one within 2 hours, somewhere within 2 hours of going to bed at night.
That's so interesting. Because I want to ask a little bit more around the protein quality, because I could sense you also know that there's such a debate around artificial proteins, the whey proteins versus dietary proteins. But just going back to your study, what was the significance of the 10 days that you used, or was it just 10 days? Because I know how it works sometimes with academic experiments. The duration could be because that was what was the research ethics requirement, or did you find 10 days there's something that happens within those first 10 days of a dietary change?
Well, you've done this before. That was very insightful, for sure. No, that's a really important question. The reason why we chose 10 days is because there had been some preliminary evidence and some early publications showing that our body begins to change in response to a lifestyle intervention or even a lifestyle choice that we make within hours. I should say maybe even days. We have these little, I call them Pac women and Pac men. I don't know if you remember the game Pac-Man.
Of course.
They come around, they eat up things. Well, we have those in our cells. I know that sounds a little bit silly, but it's true. We have little Pac women and Pac men inside the cells of our body, primarily our muscle cells. We call them glucose transporters. In this case, for our muscles, they're the GLUT4 transporters. And we did a study. We actually took muscle biopsies, and we were able to observe that these Pac women and Pac men become very engaged, very alert, very energized under certain conditions. But then they also go to sleep under certain conditions. And so what we have found is that when it comes to a change in our lifestyle, when we exercise, we supercharge our glucose transporters. And what their role is that they get to the surface of the muscle cell and they literally become Pac women and Pac men. They want to just grab glucose out of the cell, out of the blood. They're constantly chowing glucose from the blood. It's actually kind of cool to observe this. And so these GLUT4 transporters are activated during the time of exercising, in some short-term intermittent fasting, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then they can become very dormant, very sleepy, very groggy, I don't need to go to the surface of the cell today. I'm too tired. That happens when we become more sedentary. That happens when we overflood our blood with glucose. So think about this. Think about the logic that's at play here. When we don't take care of ourselves, those health-promoting processes, in this case, Pac women and Pac men that are grabbing the sugar out of the blood, they themselves say, if you're not exercising, I'm not going to exercise. And they go to sleep. They become dormant. They don't do their job. And what does that mean? Well, that means that everything gets worse and worse. And so we need to constantly provide a motivation for those GLUT4 transporters. In this case, this happens with a lot of other things in the body, but specifically with diabetes. This happens commonly. And so that 10 days was chosen because the GLUT4 process happens quickly. We have evidence that it can happen within days, a couple of days, which then manifests itself into what we call more of a phenotypic change in the body, where blood sugar starts to get very, very high. And we find that when people change their activity, either increase it or shut it down, you can have some of these changes in your metabolic health occurring within days to a week or so. And so, we were thinking 7 days, 14 days, right? Because everything is usually based on weeks. And so we just compromised and we said, let's go to 10 days. So that's how we.
The duration, dates are always so important because whenever we start something, like I know when I get back to the gym and I've had a really intense workout, I'm hoping that from that one workout, I've now lost all the weight or the excess. No, okay. I want to talk about protein quality. It's a very interesting topic for me. Also, when you were talking about the protein pacing, I was again, I'm not trying to relate this too much to myself, but I was thinking, okay, what do I normally do in the mornings, and especially because, as I mentioned before, I've sort of gone in between an intermittent fasting approach versus I'm not really a morning food person. Like I don't mind breakfast. I don't really. I generally when I wake up in the morning, I'm not hungry per se, but I'm mindful that I need something nutritious. So when I'm not intermittent fasting, I might wake up and the first thing I'll have is a protein shake. So that's interesting. But I've been trying to understand what is good quality protein, right? And so the default, as I mentioned, having a protein shake, the default that a lot of people have for convenience is protein powders. And this could be isolate whey, this could be animal-based whey or whey pea protein. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but animal protein or plant-based protein
Yes.
essentially. So let's talk a little bit about protein. I don't want to make a sort of bold statement and ask you, are protein powders good or bad? But I guess that's probably what people would want to know in the first instance, because trying to manage, I mean, I will say what I was about to say, which is, let's be honest, trying to be healthy, unfortunately, can be expensive and can be time consuming. So this is where things such as I mentioned before, protein powders and so forth, people look to for convenience. But I think we need to have that discussion. What are your thoughts? Let us know.
Yeah. Well, that's the perfect starting place when we talk about protein pacing, because as I mentioned before, so much of our messaging around health is about the quantity of what we should be doing. And we can talk about all of these things, maybe even at another podcast, because there is a lot here that we're uncovering. And really, what we should be focusing on is the quality. Bodies respond to a quality environment. We know that ourselves when we're around people that inspire us. We don't need a lot of them. We just need a short, small little bit of them. And the same thing is the case with our lifestyle. Bahija, there's no doubt that the quality of what we fuel ourselves with is paramount. And protein comes from the Greek word proteos, which is primary, vital. And it truly is. Protein is the vital nutrient. We, of course, need carbohydrates and fats and vitamins and minerals and other nourishing food sources. But there's no debating, based on lots of scientific research, that protein reigns supreme when it comes to nourishing our body. So what is it that is important here? It all comes down to things that are called essential amino acids. We have 20 amino acids that our body needs in order to make a protein. 11 of those are considered non-essential. And that word shouldn't scare anybody. Really, what non-essential means is that we just don't need to consume it. I always like to relate things to our everyday life. If something was non-essential in our everyday life, it would be something that we don't really need to obtain it, because we have it within us. Let's say, for example, it's a relationship or something. If that person is non-essential to you, that's okay, because what they provide you is something that you already have, so you don't need them. Whereas when you have a really high quality acquaintance or friend or loved one, you need them. It's essential that they are part of your life on a regular basis. And it's the same way with the amino acids. The essential amino acids are those that we cannot survive on our own. We need to seek those out in the wild of our everyday life in order to nourish our body. And so, regardless of whether it's a animal-based source of protein or a plant-based source, what is critical is that it has the 9 essential amino acids. And this is where there is a difference between animal and plant because animals contain all of the 9 essential amino acids. So you don't need to eat multiple sources of animals, right? So if you were to go and get a nice fish, a piece of wild caught fish, that has all the 9 essential amino acids, much like a pasture raised egg, or a wild bison, or elk, or some other high quality source of animal protein would have. It has all the essential amino acids. Plants don't have that luxury. So we need to do what's called complementary eating of plant sources, meaning we need to complement them with each other. We need to take certain plants and bring them into the mix so that we can then put together a full complement of the essential amino acids and all of the 20 amino acids that we can form a protein. So it's a little bit harder from a knowledge standpoint to eat really healthy from a plant-based format entirely. We call that vegan, because you have to be a real sleuth. You have to really know what you're doing. You can't just say, oh, for ethical reasons or for environmental reasons or for health reasons, I'm just going to go to becoming a plant-based vegan eater. Well, it's really hard to do that. And I've seen over the course of my career, and having been one without understanding it fully myself for a period of time, I was not very healthy. In fact, I was, on the fringe of always being sick. So yeah, it's not an easy. You have to really understand what you're doing. So what is the highest quality? What has that complement of the essential amino acids and the other non-essential amino acids to give us the highest quality protein? Well, we know through scientific research that a complete undenatured whey protein concentrate is the highest amount. And again, I talk about this in detail in my book because I feel so passionate about it. I want people to start off with a win. And so obtaining those highest quality sources of, excuse me, plant-based protein, animal-based proteins with whey is the highest quality. But like you said, it can get expensive. But in the whole scheme of things, when you look at the actual cost of some of these really high quality, undenatured, organic, or what we call grass-fed sources of whey protein, they're really not any more expensive than other sources of high quality protein. In fact, in a lot of ways, the technology around capturing these undenatured, meaning they're in their form that nature intended them to be when it's undenatured, and it's grass fed. It's a wild, out in the wild, roaming animal. And that can be cows and goats, by the way. We have undenatured grass-fed goats as well, so they only eat grass. Well, they should. Those are super high quality. So I like to recommend those to people just in general because they're so healthy for you. Even if you wanted to be a plant-based eater, when you're eating those sources of protein from a grass-fed animal, you're obtaining the highest quality grass-fed or plant-based version of that nourishment that you can get. So I think sometimes people have a misconception about animal and plant. And so those would be the highest quality. And then, as I mentioned before, wild-caught sources of animal protein, out in the pasture grazing, highest quality sources of protein with eggs, for example, dairy and Greek yogurt. I mean, just super high quality. But yeah, it can be costly. But here's, again, I know you've heard this, and many, hopefully, of the listeners have heard it too. You're going to pay for it on either end. And usually on the disease end, it's a lot more expensive. But that doesn't solve the economic issue of people that in the given moment, socioeconomically, or living in a food desert, that are going to face a challenge in trying to obtain these sources. But as much as possible, we need to do a better job educating people of what truly is optimal nutrition. I'm a big believer in plant-based. I think fruits and vegetables are fantastic, but there's an overemphasis on those things at the expense of what at the very core of our health that we need, and that's high-quality protein. There's no denying that. So as much as we need to increase the intake of fresh fruits and vegetables because of the phytonutrients and the vitamins and minerals, first and foremost for optimal health and people that are in some of those disadvantaged environments of living, protein should be, without question, the number one emphasis. And we just need to do a better job of getting that public health message out for people, because it'll make just a massive change in their overall health, much more so than the emphasis on fresh fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, as much as I love those things and understand the value of how important they are, protein is the more important nutrient. And so, yeah, in both cases, with plant-based and animal-based, it's high quality. And like you said, pea protein is very good. Mung bean protein, fava bean protein, brown rice protein, of course, the pea protein, some forms of soy protein, if they haven't been refined to a really great degree with just a higher concentration of some of those phytoestrogens. But yeah, those are all really healthy plant-based sources of protein.
That's really interesting because another aspect of work that I do is around falsified medicines and misinformation as well. And there's always this debate around who 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 did the public listen to? And you probably, I don't know if you've had this in your career where um, at some point using social media to communicate your research was sort of like, oh, who does that? We're scientists. And then now it's moved to we need to get more scientists, we need to get more experts to be on social media and share their knowledge so that people know who, like they can, it's a reputable source because anybody can
Thank you
pick
for
up a
doing what you
camera.
do.
Thank you so much. I'm trying. But
Yeah.
that's part of it. And it's really that education, as you said, that's required because there isn't enough clarity out there
Mm,
that or visibility of knowledge, because also sometimes the media pick up something and they just run with it,
yeah.
and it's important to get that information out there. So if we, because I want to come back to protein basing, but I wanted to understand
Okay.
protein pacing in the context of intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
So but before we go on to that, intermittent fasting, let's talk about it. What is
Good.
it? What is the benefit? Anything, all the knowledge you have on intermittent fasting, please share.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to be really succinct. Intermittent fasting falls under a bigger umbrella of caloric restriction. It's a form of reducing calorie intake. Some would call it a little bit of its own entity, which is understandable because here's why. Caloric restriction means you are reducing the number of calories that your body is accustomed to consuming to maintain it, what we call energy balance. So that's keeping our body in this state of equilibrium and homeostasis. So with caloric restriction, it's reducing calorie intake. And for a lot of people, it's super hard to do. I mean, just think about if all of a sudden I was to say, okay, Bahija, I'm going to have you reduce your intake by 25% every single day. I mean, I would struggle with that. That would be really hard. I mean, just from a psychological standpoint, you might be able to do it, but from the mental anguish, it might be really hard. So we know that caloric restriction is in many ways beneficial to us. It provides a lot of health benefits in terms of the metabolic processes that are taking place inside of our body, including our brain. It actually has some improvement with brain cognition. And we've had really good success with caloric restriction in laboratory animals, primates and mice and other animal forms. When we've been able to, when the humans have been able to control the feeding in those animals, there's been some health improvement. But in humans, it's not been so successful. And so as a result, we have discovered that this intermittent reduction or absence of food has also proven beneficial, and hence the intermittent fasting. And so we have lots of different forms of it. We have very well known over across the pond in UK is, of course, Michael Mosley's form of it, the 5-2. So you eat normal for 5 days and then you reduce your intake drastically for 2 days. And so that really caught fire, several years ago for a while, and it was a great success. So we do something similar to that, but actually we do it quite different than his model. And then there's the alternate day fasting. So that's eating normal one day, actually a little bit more than you would normally eat one day. And then the next day you reduce your intake nearly down to nothing the next day. So a lot of people do that it's called alternate day fasting. And that's what it means, just maintaining intake, maybe a little bit more one day, and then a little bit less the next day. And then there's the 24-hour or the 48-hour. That's what we do, but in a much different model than what has been done in the past. And then there's what's called time-restricted eating. Time-restricted feeding is for the laboratory animals because we feed them through chow, but time-restricted eating is what we use for the term for humans. And that's been successful. So people eat within a feeding window of either 8 hours, 6 hours, or 4 hours. So it's called a 16-8, an 18-6, or a 24. And so let me just, so that's, I gave you a real quick, summary of all of them. Again, I go into great detail in my book describing all of them. But essentially what we have found through, I think, some really good research is that intermittent fasting in and of itself is not optimal. And here's why. It de-emphasizes the quality of the nourishment we're providing either during the eating window, 8, 6, or 4, or the day that we're doing our eating process, and even on the non-eating day. So people say, well, don't we? So the quality component, my point I'm trying to make here, has been second tier. It's kind of been, put as secondary to the absence or the avoidance of eating during a window of time, 16, 18, or 20 hours, or for a full day or two. And that's unfortunate because it's missed the most important part of intermittent fasting, and that's an emphasis, again, I'm going to go back to use this word, the quality of the nutrients that you're consuming within that window of 8, 6, or 4 hours, or that day of when you are eating. And so we need to, again, you talked about education, and I'm so glad you emphasized that because we're just missing the bullseye. I always think of this as a dartboard, and we're just throwing the darts all over the wall and missing the board entirely right now, never mind the bullseye. And so what I have tried to do and attempt to do over the last decade or so is to hone in on the bullseye much better and emphasize the quality during the feeding and the fasting. And so that's what we do. And so we don't call it intermittent fasting, we call it intermittent nutritional fasting, or I like to use the word nutrient dense intermittent fasting. And then protein pacing, so that people understand that even during these periods of absence of eating or reduction in eating, they should be emphasizing high quality. And I give this analogy, and I've been talking about it a lot lately, but it's worth repeating. And that is, I tell people, if you were given the task of cleaning your house or your office or your bedroom or whatever, a living space, and you left all of the dirty dishes, the dirty clothes, all the furniture debris that's out, and you just started to vacuum around all of that, or clean the counters, or clean your bathroom space around dirty towels still on the floor. That wouldn't clean the room very well, right? So, to think that our bodies can benefit from helping it clean itself, detoxify itself, which the body does, by the way, still with a lot of debris, and that's the food that we eat, is not going to happen. You can't, continue to eat on a regular basis and expect your body to really be healthy because you need to remove the debris first. So that's number one. There is some true benefit from reducing the number of calories we eat in some format, some fashion, whether it's within a day or with a whole day. So that intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating has the potential to be really beneficial. And then people say, well, I'm going to forego and avoid any calorie. I'm just going to drink water or non-nutritive beverages, during that fasting period. And that's not ideal because that's the equivalent of using just water on your dirty clothes or your dirty counters or your dirty dishes or your dirty walls and windows and toilets and bathtubs and things like that. That's not effective. And so, for people to think that just consuming water is the most ideal environment we want to have during this downtime of eating in a fasting period is just not ideal. We need to provide these really high quality organic cleaning agents. And what we use in our model are things like antioxidants and adaptogens. So these are, certain, in most cases, plant-derived material that have some scientific validity and credibility, evidence-based, to really help the body during that cleaning period, fasting period. And there's evidence to show that it absolutely does. You don't want to overload the system. I'm not suggesting that we eat a lot of calories, but very strategically consumed in very, very small quantities of these high quality, organic, natural, plant-based cleaning agents. Oh, I mean, it's amazing the difference that we're finding. And so I'm really glad you asked that question, because when we use what's called a nutrient-dense intermittent nutritional fast of anywhere between 24, well, it ends up being 36 hours because you don't eat over the night after, to 60 hours. So, somewhere around a 1 or 2 days is what I usually tell people, is super beneficial. It turns on a process called autophagy. And autophagy is just a fancy scientific name for house cleaning of the body. It just removes old debris that we don't want around anymore. Because one of the challenges of keeping old, unwanted cells and debris inside of our body is that it can trigger the growth of cells that are unhealthy, cancer, for example, inflammation, inflammatory cells. So we want to always engage in some level of autophagy inside of our body. Autophagy is turned on when we reduce the food intake inside of our body, because it provides an environment for cleaning to start to take place. Vacuuming, I call it vacuuming in the body. So autophagy is vacuuming. And we need to reduce the food intake when that happens. But here's what's so cool, Bahija, is when you have that process starting to take place, this vacuuming. So if I'm in an office right now, a conference room, and if I were to start to vacuum and clean things up and remove some of the trash can is overflowing a little bit if I showed it to you. If I were to start to remove that, the cell recognizes that. The cell recognizes that, oh, wow, this is really cool. There's more cleanliness. There's more room available. There's more vacancy available inside the cell. And would you believe that when our cells detect an increased vacancy inside the cell, they actually start to ramp up the machinery necessary to start to build new tissue. We call it protein synthesis. So when you undergo a nutrient-dense intermittent fast and provide really high-quality cleaning agents, so I wouldn't just vacuum the floor, I want to clean the table and put some healthy, organic, non-toxic carpet cleaners and garbage cleaners and things like that. Man, that's the ideal environment to then begin to turn on the production of new furniture and new cell structures, protein synthesis. So those two things work in tandem. They're congruent. They're synergistic with each other. So when we undergo an intermittent nutritional fast in the right way, it actually turns on the machinery. Now you have to then provide the ingredients, right? You need to provide the products to build, or the substances to build the products. And that's where the feeding is so important. So for you, I'll just use you as a great example. You claim and state, like many people, by the way, probably more in Europe, in UK than here in the States. We're a little bit more gluttonous here than you all are, but over there, you all like to ease your way into the day. But when you undergo an intermittent nutritional fast, it's paramount that the following morning of either a 1 or a 2 day intermittent nutritional fast, you flood your body with the highest quality nutrients that you can, because that's when those packed women and packed men, not just for glucose, but also for amino acids, are at their highest state of activity. And then they bring them into the cell, and then the manufacturing of new protein structures begins. So the model of the intermittent nutritional fast of a 1 or 2 day is actually much more powerful in terms of providing our body, because you're not doing it regularly. I don't recommend this for people unless you're in an active state, what we call a dynamic state of weight loss. We do that with our study participants. And as you've read in my published papers, we do it for a period of 1 to 3 months. Sometimes we go to 4 months if the person is starting at a very high rate of excess body weight and body fat. Then they can do it on a weekly or every other week basis of a 1 or 2 day intermittent fast. But for normal healthy people, I would recommend it at the very most once a 1 or 2 day. I'm talking about intermittent fast every month or 2 months. I myself, I'm still very active. I'm very lean. I wouldn't recommend it for people like myself on a monthly basis. I would do it. And the great thing is there's staying power, there's memory. We talk about muscle memory, but there's brain memory, there's cellular memory of these intermittent nutritional fasts when you do them for 1 or 2 days, that the autophagy mechanisms stay active for a very long period of time. So you get the benefit of it. And that's been proven more effective than the time-restricted eating, because with time-restricted eating, you're missing out on the protein pacing, protein synthesis pathway being activated. And so when people abstain regularly every day, which many people do, by the way, for 16 hours or 18 hours at a time, and in some cases 20 hours, they have just a 4-hour eating window, you compromise your lean body mass, your lean skeletal muscle mass, and that's never a good idea. We always want to place the priority on making sure that our vital organs, our brain, and our muscle mass is being tended to on a regular basis. So the scientific evidence does not support long-term time-restricted eating of 16, 18, or 20 hours. You're much better off doing the intermittent nutritional fasting to derive the greatest benefit. So I gave you an earful, but I think it's really important because there's so much misinformation.
I mean, I have learned so much with that because as you were talking, I was like, okay, I see what I'm doing wrong. And because I've been doing the time, so I've done the
Yep.
16-hour fast, 8-hour eat, or 18-hour fast and 4-hour eat. And I've also, when you were saying about, in that time drinking water, and I was like, yeah, that's what I do. I drink lots of water in that time. But then I always feel, because I usually break my fast, oddly enough, with a protein shake, like a nutritious protein shake. I have
Yeah.
the protein powder. I have this antioxidant powder thing that I put greens.
Excellent.
It's called greens.
Yep.
And I always find it's like my body is like, oh, it's like a sponge, excited to have that thing. So there's, in everything that you've been saying, I'm like, okay, I see, I can resonate, even though I've not done the your protein pacing intermittent nutrition dense diet, but I will actually be doing it, because I could see how on some level I've been doing bits, but also just trying to navigate my way, because there is so much information about intermittent fasting that, oh, do it, it's good for you, but not fully enough explanation as to how and what could work. And you feel it within yourself at times when you do your intermittent fasting, and you, on one hand, you are like, okay, yes, I'm happy to be eating in my window, but there is a feeling of nutrition loss, I have to say, because also in that window of the 8 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours, I got my maths wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
You end up, you have to stop yourself from ravishing the food, whatever food, and not eaten for the last 18 hours or 12 hours or
Great
six
point.
hours, 16 hours. And that's why I started doing the protein shake, to ease me in to eating. So it's like to stop me from rushing to like a big plate of whatever, and pause, so I'm not eating from a place of hunger. I'm eating from a
Yeah.
place of, oh, okay, I'm trying to think. I think the listeners, people listening, might be who may not have fasted. I know one of my friends, we are intermittent fasting buddies, but I will be
Yeah.
sending her this episode to say, yeah, we need to revise what we're doing, because um I think what so I can say where my struggles could be, and I think this would resonate with a lot of people. And I just want to clarify that is the suggestion not necessarily the need to fast daily, weekly, whatever, but it's almost to schedule. I've heard of this before where people say, "Oh, this is like my fasting week," where they eat healthy for, let's say, 3 weeks in the month, and then they have a week where it's like they are uh doing their fast, maybe a 24-hour fast or something, and just like that's what they do once a month or once every 3 months. Is that roughly how it would work in your model? That it's not as you said, it's not every week to do the 20-hour fast and then the next day have your nutritious diet, but it's you sort of plan it and do and have your fasting period, let's say every quarter or something like that. Have
Yes.
I got that right?
You are, yes, you're definitely on the right path. So I would recommend that for people who are looking to incorporate a lifestyle change because of health. Let's say they have some excess body weight, maybe even body fat around their abdominal visceral region, that's their midsection. Um, Doing a 1 or 2 day intermittent nutritional fast on a weekly basis, so 1 or 2 days a week for a period of time, 1 month or 2 months, as I said before, in some of our study participants, because we're working with people that have fairly significant disease onset. We'll extend it to 3, in some cases even 4 months. But so yes, then you could do it on a weekly basis. You would do it 1 or 2 days, and that's what my published research is primarily documenting. The drastic. I mean, these are, I thought the study that I did back in 1980, at my postdoc at Washington University was, eye-opening. This research is even more because of such pronounced overall magnitude of health improvement that occurs in these people. Now they're starting at a more advanced state of disease, but in those cases, a weekly intermittent nutritional fast for 1 or 2 days is the sweet spot. For people just for general health benefit, you don't need to do it that often. That could be considered a little bit extreme or excessive for the body to constantly have to manage in terms of a calorie reduction by that much. But you want to maybe do it once a month in some cases. So if there are some people that maybe in their daily routine just aren't living optimally, right? They're at a sedentary desk. They're on lots of business trips and business lunches, or they don't have the best eating practices. I would say that once a month of a 1 or 2 day would be something that could be extremely beneficial. For people that so I'm giving you the different tiers. We're starting at a disease state. You could do it weekly for a window of time, 1 to 4 months. For people that are a little bit more healthy, maybe don't have that significant of disease, but their lifestyle is not very favorable. They sit at a sedentary desk all day. They don't have the best eating practices. They travel a lot. Maybe once a month would be ideal for them. And then for people that are on top of their health, they're managing their health really well. It's still very important to do, but it's more important to do on a quarterly basis. So that's I call it periodization of intermittent nutritional fasting. It really varies for different groups of the population, but equally beneficial. I mean, it's just, even I have athletes that I work with, very elite level athletes, and I always know that for some of them, they're like, is this really good for me? I mean, I need to stay really well nourished. Well, I say absolutely, because even exercise, and there's lots of studies that are coming out. There was one that was just published recently. Excessive exercise or intense exercise on a regular basis is not really healthy for us. I mean, it builds up a lot of free radical damage. And not only that, we have a huge, massive amount of energy flux. I know I'm one of these people. During my heavy competing session seasons, I'm forcing down a lot of food. I'm expending a lot of energy. It's not good for our cells. That high turnover of energy flux, we call it, produces a lot of free radicals, not just in our muscles, but in our heart, our brain, our vital organs. So it's always a good idea. But I periodize it in athletes. So what I do is I say, following the competitive season, when you've been exerting yourself at a very high level, you've had high energy flux of expenditure and intake, take 1 or 2 days within the first week of finishing your season. That's an ideal. So, for those in UK, in football on the pitch, they pretty much play all year round now, but they do have certain in and off seasons. for sure in that 1 week after that really heavy, intense period of season for those players is an ideal time to undergo a 1 or 2 day intermittent nutritional fast, because that'll help reverse a lot of the free radical damage that was brought on through that competitive season. Another really good time to do it with an elite athlete, so I'm kind of giving you the full spectrum here, is also to do it after a heavy training session. So if they've been periodized on a very heavy training load, and they usually do that for a 4 to 8 week time period, take 1 or 2 days following that, just as you're getting ready for the preseason. They usually are doing that preseason, that heavy training load volume. 100%. You want to make sure that you're taking a 1 or 2 days to help, prepare the body for the season itself. And those are really good time points, because they're not, you're not risking a performance decrement. You've just finished the season, or in the case of the preseason, the heavy load training module, you haven't even started the preseason training yet. You've just done your really heavy, high volume baseline training, but it's high energy flux. So those are the two primary for the elite athletes out there that are listening to your podcast. It's what I follow. I do intermittent nutritional 1 or 2 day fast, generally a minimum of 2 days a year, 2 times a year, sorry. Sometimes, depending upon my schedule, I'll put a third one in. So, yeah.
When you talked about the athletes, I read your paper about gut microbiota, gut health. I think we'll have to have you come on as a separate episode to talk
good.
about that,
Yeah,
because it's a lot. Yeah, and it's another part, because I've had an episode around probiotics, and I'm quite interested in that.
So much we could talk about. I hope we have a chance to have another conversation, Bahija. I love this. This is so fun. But for you and for those listeners out there, that when you are competing like that, one of our studies that we conducted in our lab was applying the protein pacing with an antioxidant, and we induced muscle soreness. So we have a laboratory piece of equipment that induces significant muscle soreness. It's called Cybex. And so we exercised the leg to the point where it became very, very sore. And what we did was we gave both a placebo and a protein pacing mixture with an antioxidant. And that reduced soreness, significantly. So I just wanted to put that out there for you, because
Thank you.
one way to help reduce that soreness is to take some protein and throw in some berries and some turmeric and some ginger and some cinnamon, and some antioxidants that will help reduce the inflammation. And you do that for, we followed them for 24 hours after, and we showed that they had really significant reductions in inflammation.
Oh, thank you for that, because that is what we need. I know this is going to be so beneficial and helpful to people, because those are the things. And I think we forget the power of food, the power of nutrition. We have all that we need in front of us. It's just knowing how to use it. I'm also a pharmacist as well, and I guess as I was listening to you, I was thinking about what we do in clinical practice by way of intervention advice to patients, right? And I think something that could be quite interesting is just understanding from your perspective what you propose or what you feel healthcare professionals could do to support people, in terms of advice around the nutrition. Like, what do they need to do to empower themselves knowledge-wise to be able to, I don't know, impart some of what you said to people so that they can lead healthier lives?
That's such a important question, and I think about that all the time. In fact, in many of our conclusion statements in our published peer-reviewed research, we kind of go into that, recommendations, implications, public health messaging, impact of our research. And I think just continued not seeking of knowledge and choosing the research. I'm a fellow, as I'm sure you are, of certain organizations. I'm a fellow of the American College of Sports Medicine. I'm a fellow of the Obesity Society. I'm a fellow of the International Society of Sport Nutrition. I'm on the International Protein Board. So I'm on all these governing bodies. And unfortunately, even at that level, sometimes what they try to do is stake the claims or the recommendations with all of the cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, because everyone is very territorial. Everyone wants a piece of having their research to be part of the recommendations and guidelines. And that ends up being what we use, healthcare professionals use, as the disseminating information to the general public. So you take the white paper or the position stand of this is how you should eat healthy based on these recommendations. And I think those are really well intentioned. There's no doubt that they are. I serve on, as I said, some of these governing committees. The missed opportunity is that they're often unrealistic for the majority of the world to follow. It's why less than 20% of adults meet the exercise recommendations. I think because they think they're so lofty, they're so far-reaching that there's just no way I can fulfill that. I know personally when I look at the exercise recommendations that are put out by the governing body in the world, the American College of Sports Medicine, I kind of sit back and have a sigh of exasperation, like, oh my God, I can't do that. That's too lofty. That's too much. And so that's what I tried to capture. I know I keep bringing it up in my book, The Prize Life, because I said to myself, what is the lowest hanging fruit or the lowest threshold for the majority of the population to be able to accomplish and still get a benefit from? And that's what I created with The Prize Life. And I want to just state that very emphatically, that what I designed this protocol and what I've scientifically tested it with the goal in mind is to say, what other alternative can we provide to the public, the world, that will allow them to achieve health and performance, optimal health and performance, without completely being hostage to these healthy lifestyle recommendations? Because that's what most people feel. They just feel like, oh my God, I'm hostage again today because I've got to meet all of these health recommendations and goals that I know I can't fulfill. I felt that in my own life. And so to answer your question, I think turning toward some of the research that is showing that there is a different solution. I think staying just abreast of the research as much as possible. And again, I'm going to put a plug in for my research because this is what I do. This is the world I live in. This is my wheelhouse. I just think we need to provide a better roadmap of realistic expectations for the majority of the world to be able to meet and still get healthy. And that's what the Prize Life does. It says that you don't need to exercise every day to exhaustion. You don't need to do 10,000 steps every single day. That's just a complete misinformation. I commented on this on many Medscape and WebMD articles, saying that there's no scientific evidence that you have to get to 10,000 steps. Anywhere between 4,000 and 10,000. Actually, anything above 2,800 in terms of an increasing amount is beneficial. So, yeah, we just need to take a step back and I think from a healthcare perspective, recommendation and interaction with patients is to let them know that you can derive significant health benefit from doing less when it's higher quality. That would be my message. So focus on the quality, not the quantity. In fact, I'm glad I got to that final message that I just gave you, because if I had one piece of advice for healthcare, it would be focus on giving a very high quality lifestyle strategy as opposed to telling people to try to go out and achieve 150 minutes of aerobic exercise every day, or walking 10,000 steps every day. It's pie in the sky, unachievable for the majority of people. Give them a high quality lifestyle strategy of nutrition and exercise, and that'll win the day.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. This has been such a inspiring conversation in many different ways, not just in part your expertise, what you've done, like, the science, what we've talked about, the Prize Life app, your book, but also for me, I'm inspired when I see other academics, other scientists that have transitioned their work from the lab into the clinic, into the outside world, because, I think a lot of us who have the privilege of being researchers, who have the privilege to think of something and manifest it, sometimes we can stay too much behind our building and in our lab. So I'm inspired by the fact that you have not only been able to bring your work out into the forefront, but you've actually created tools that can help people by way of your app, by writing a book, that people have access. I hate to say, but like the quote unquote layperson has access to your knowledge in a way that's palatable for them. And that inspires me as well. And it keeps me motivated, it's keeping me motivated even from this conversation, of the importance of bringing that knowledge to the forefront. I'm going to put the links for all your things in the episode description, as well. But I would love to have you to come back, so we could talk more about the exercise, the gut
Love it.
microbiota, and also I will share my experience, as well on trying protein pacing, and keep you in the loop of that. I'm very excited to try. And if you are ever in the UK, please do let me know. If you have any trips coming up, please do let me know, because I would love to just meet you in person, but see if perhaps we could also facilitate like a discussion about your book, and see if we can have more of a focused conversation in person with some people in the audience, to talk about what you're doing.
In Australia in February, and I'm slated to go to Europe, Belgium, UK in May, June. And that's definitely, I would be totally down for that. That would be
Oh,
great.
that's brilliant. Thank you so much. So, lastly, let people know where they can find you. If anybody wants to find you online, not in person, make it weird. But if people want to find you, let the audience know where they can reach you.
So real quickly, University of Pittsburgh in the USA. You can just Google my name, Paul Arciero, University of Pittsburgh. You'll see my university page there. You can find me on the web at paularciero.com. And then, of course, on Amazon, you can find me with the Prize Life book. And then, as we talked about, thank you so much. I'm grateful because it's a free app. I'm here to help serve it and be a good steward of optimal health and performance. But my app is on the iOS Apple Store, and it's called The Prize Life. And when you download it, it's an easy, quick download. But this is one of the screens that you'll get coming up, and it'll tell you your protein pacing and daily schedule. And it's called Prize Life. P-R-I. It spells it like the Brits do, UK. P-R-I-S-E. So instead of the Z that we use here in the States, it's P-R-I-S-E, and that's an acronym. And we can talk about that as well, because it'll lend itself really well to the exercise time of day. So this has been such a treat. Thank you so
Brilliant.
much for allowing me to be here. Yeah, this was a lot of fun for me. So I hope others enjoyed it. Bye bye.